Greetings, WVU, West Virginia University, Department of Geography, World Regions class. This is an official shout out from me, the Plaid Avenger, to you, the awesome peeps in World Regions. Whoop, whoop, go Mountaineers. This is a particular shout out upon the request of the most awesomely prime Professor Maria Perez, your teacher of this awesome World Regional Geography class. So shout out, hey there, what's up? Hope you had a great semester. Hope you enjoyed reading and hopefully learning from the Plaid Avengers World 9th edition that hopefully you've now gone all the way through, learned tons of stuff, and thrown away. Actually, hope you gave it away to somebody else so the learning can continue in another generation. Your great Professor Perez asked me to give you a shout out just to say, hey, what's up? And to maybe cite some things that you learned in this book, in this semester, and update some things about what's going on in the world when it comes to populism, and maybe where this is going in the future, by the way. I wrote this book about 1.5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, when this term populism was just in its formative heyday on the world stage as more and more populist leaders were rising to power. Wrote it when one Donald Trump was running for president of the United States. He has since, of course, won the presidency of the United States, but he's not the only populist leader out there. What is populism? You already learned this in the book. It's a leader or someone, a democracy or otherwise, who speaks on behalf of the ordinary, the common people, the common clave, the working class, the blue collar, on ordinary ideas, strong-willed, usually men, who are going to force their opinion on the world on how to fix things. And Donald Trump is just one example on planet Earth, but there's also the leader of China, Xi Jinping, not a democracy, but a populist because he is supported by a vast majority of the population who thinks he's going to fix everything and make things right. He has concentrated his power further and further in the course of the last few years so that he's going to be the political leader of China for the rest of his life. You also have Prime Minister Recep Erdogan of Turkey, or is he the president? I don't know. He's been both. He's likely in power for the rest of his life, another populist leader who's been absorbing more and more power in what was a democracy, now turning into a one-party state. You also have the leader of the Philippines and the leader of many other countries. One could even say that Prime Minister Modi of India is a very popular leader who's leading a charge of the majority of the people to implement his policies in the way he sees fit to fix the world. Now, what has this meant for the world? We still have this rise of populism globally, although it's starting to taper off now, a few years later. But it's really impacting the world because of President Donald Trump's opinions on how the world should be run, particularly when it comes to reinforcing the primacy of this thing we call the state, or the nation state. Other terms you learned in this course, I'll bet. And that is, he has led the charge, and he has had other populist leaders follow him worldwide, to move away from an internationalist system. That is a system that states work together for those supranationalist organizations that you also learned about in this class. Things like the European Union or NATO or the United Nations. There's lots of them. And there's been a move away from all of those entities since the rise of these populist figures around the world. Now, why is that? Well, it appears that these populist figures want to solve many of the world's problems or their country's problems by concentrating on their own people in their own state. In other words, it's not that everybody's saying we don't care about the rest of the world or we don't want to participate in any other supranationalist organizations. Although Donald Trump has led his entire presidency saying, I don't like NATO, I don't care about the UN, I don't care about this. So he's led the charge. But it's not that these populist leaders are giving up on the international system. It's more that they're saying, we want to refocus power and primacy back on our own state, at the expense of working together with others in other states in these supranationalist organizations. So what the biggest impact of populism worldwide right this second is a weakening of international institutions, particularly the United Nations, that really was already semi-toothless when it comes to enforcing laws globally and has become more so as the United States has retracted away from it, and that's led other entities to retract away from full participation in the United Nations. But you're also seeing this manifest itself in the dissolution of the European Union. I shouldn't say that. Those are too strong words. Let's just say the United Kingdom's decision to rip itself away from a supranationalist organization called the European Union. It also is playing itself out with Donald Trump saying we don't support NATO as much. Maybe we think NATO is outdated. That military institute, international organization that's truly powerful and awesome, has started to fragment a bit as well. And if you start to look at other trading blocs around the world, most of them are starting to kind of not wane in power, but there was a real drive towards that for the last 50 to 60 to, let's even say, 100 years. And that's starting to slow down, and again, even starting to go backwards just a bit for some of these particular institutions I've pointed to. That's not to suggest that every populist leader around the planet doesn't want to participate in international organizations. The president of China, president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, another great example of a populist leader. These are folks that are populist, but they still want to maintain that global order of the past because they're playing a significantly powerful role in it as other leaders like Donald Trump move away from center stage in international organizations. All that makes sense? I hope so, because that actually is, this current theme that I'm talking about is playing into the next edition of this very textbook. The 10th edition of the Plaid Avengers World is going to focus on what I'm going to call the walled world. And maybe Professor Perez can say a few things about this. When I close this down, the walled world is all about the increasingly fractured planet where certain groups of countries want to work together and build walls or barriers to exclude other groups, populations, countries, and or regions. And the easy way to think about this in this walled world is it does appear that the rich world, the rich developed world, is starting to close ranks and not want to let people from other poorer regions come into their regions. Oh, I know you know what I'm talking about now. Maybe this whole building a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border, perhaps. Maybe the wall between North and South Korea, perhaps. Maybe the Mediterranean Sea as a water barrier that's being increasingly patrolled to keep immigrants out from Middle East and North Africa from coming into the European Union. That's the next big trend that this populism trend is feeding into, is how world regions are going to increasingly isolate themselves, some physically with barriers, in the coming years or perhaps decades. Interesting concept. Yep, that's going to be the topic of the 10th edition of the Plaid Avengers World. But once again, thanks for reading this book. Hope you learned a bunch of stuff in world regions, and have a great end of semester and a great summer and a particularly awesome and educated life. You have to know geography. You got to know where you're at to understand where you're going.